Welcome back. This is our third and final video for meiosis, and we're going to be looking at life cycles. So this was a picture the original authors of this slideshow put in here, so I thought I'd leave it in here. Looks like a pretty nice camera that they used to take this picture, but you can see the original source down there. Sexual reproduction. When we look at multicellular organisms, there are very, very few that divide only through asexual reproduction. So why do we need sexual reproduction? What are the advantages that it provides for us? This is really the variation that is created that we talked about in the previous video. Crossing over, independent assortment, random fertilization, all of this generates variation in our offspring, those daughter cells, and that's important to survival and reproduction. And you'll examine this further in Bio 4b. In asexual organisms that divide through asexual reproduction, the only source of variation for them is really mutation. So there are three main categories of life cycles for multicellular organisms. Some are diploid-dominant, like humans and other animals and things like this dragonfly. Some are haploid-dominant, like these fungi over here. So what does that mean? Diploid-dominant means what you usually see, like when I look at the human body and all of my somatic cells, my body cells, those are diploid. So what you usually see are those cells diploid or haploid. So humans, we're looking at diploid cells. We only have gametes that are haploid. For the second one, haploid dominant, when I'm looking at this mushroom over here, the structure, the main body, these are haploid cells. And some of them go through something called alternation of generations. And we'll see this in some plants and algae, or actually all plants and algae. This is when you have both. You'll have diploid dominant stage and a haploid dominant stage. As I mentioned, most animals, like humans, have a diploid dominant stage or life cycle. So you see that most of our body cells are diploid cells. The only haploid cells that we make are our gametes, which are our sperm and egg. Germ cells, and germ cells are embryonic cells that have potential into the potential of developing into a gamete. These are produced by the gonads. The gonads are the sex organs like testes and ovaries. These germ cells within the gonads use mitosis to propagate the cell line. Males will make sperm forever. Females actually make all of their eggs before they're born. So they're making them while they're still in their mom's uterus. That will be more information for your next course though. But gametes, we know, are going to be haploid and they're produced through meiosis. When they come together, so when the sperm fertilizes the egg, we produce the zygote, and the zygote will be diploid. So there is no multicellular haploid stage. These are going to be single cells, the sperm and egg. In most fungi, such as this type of bread mold called black bread mold, or it's called rhizopus, and some algae, the body of the organism, it's hard to see here, but if you zoom in, you can see it more closely. The body of the organism is haploid. So this is a haploid dominant life cycle. What happens is during sexual reproduction, specialized haploid cells from two different individuals that are designated the positive or the negative mating type will join together to form a diploid zygote. This will immediately go through meiosis to form 4 haploid spores, and the process continues. Although these haploid spores are like the parent cells that they came from, they're actually genetically different because of the new genetic combination that was created when the zygote was formed. So remember, in meiosis, we have that crossing over, the independent assortment, etc. These spores will eventually form a multicellular haploid structure, and that happens through many rounds of mitosis. And then finally, we have our third type called alternation of generations. This happens in all plants and some algae. I think earlier in the previous slide I said all plants and algae. It sounded like all plants and all algae, I meant all plants and some algae. So I'm going to talk about this in the next slide as we go through the picture. All right, so I'm going to go through the bullet points that you saw in the previous slide. But for alternation of generations, these are pretty cool because the plants have both a haploid body structure and a diploid body structure. So the haploid multicellular plants are called gametophytes. And this is because they're going to produce gametes from certain specialized cells. Here, when the sperm and egg come together through fertilization, they're going to produce a zygote, and that's going to go through mitosis to generate a diploid sporophyte plant. Then specialized cells will undergo meiosis to generate those haploid spores, and those haploid spores go through mitosis to regenerate that gametophyte. So this does not happen in humans, but if I pretended it did, if it was possible, it would be like if our sperm and egg could go through mitosis and generate a human, like a haploid human. I guess the egg would generate a genetically female human and the sperm would generate a genetically male human. But that does not happen. So gametes cannot form whole structures like the plants can. All right, that takes us to the end of chapter 11. In chapter 12, we're going to be looking at Mendelian genetics.